The morning Zara Okonkwo got called a fat liability in front of 47 people. She was holding a coffee she hadn't even had a chance to drink yet. It was a Tuesday, 7:53 in the morning, the kind of damp Chicago November that crawled under your coat and stayed there. She'd taken the 6:15 bus from Pilsen, reread her risk analysis notes on her phone the whole ride, and walked into Aldgate Meridian Capital's 38th floor conference room with 12 minutes to spare. Something she always did, because 12 minutes meant she could check the projector cables, refill the water pitchers, and still have 90 seconds to breathe before people started filing in. She had done this every Monday and Tuesday for 2 years. Nobody had ever once thanked her for it. The meeting was a quarterly performance review for Aldgate's private equity division. The kind of room that made visiting clients sit up straighter and speak in lower voices. Floor-to-ceiling glass, leather chairs that cost more than Zara's monthly rent. The Chicago skyline pressing up against the windows like it was trying to get in. Zara was the only risk analyst in the room who didn't have a nameplate. She'd stopped asking about that 6 months ago. She was adjusting the slide deck on the main display when Victor Aldgate walked in. Not the CEO, his son. 32 years old, Yale MBA, the kind of man who wore his watch on the outside of his cufflink. He walked into rooms the way certain people always did, like the room had been waiting for him specifically. Behind him came 3 other men in expensive suits, and behind them came someone Zara didn't recognize. She noticed him the way you notice a shift in air pressure. Tall, dark jacket, no tie, not the kind of no tie that said casual Friday, the kind that said he didn't ask anyone's permission. His eyes moved across the room in a single sweep, the way someone does when they've spent a long time in rooms where not knowing where all the exits are is a problem. He sat at the far end of the table. Nobody introduced him. Zara went back to the slide deck. The meeting started. Victor Aldgate stood at the head of the table and talked for 20 minutes about third quarter projections she had personally compiled, without once using her name. She had gotten used to that too. Then the Castellan Group's numbers came up. The Castellan Group was the reason the unintroduced man was in the room. Zara knew this because she had written the risk profile on them herself. 14 pages, flagged yellow at the top because she hadn't been able to get clean data on 2 of their subsidiary holdings. She'd sent that flag up the chain 3 weeks ago. She had a red receipt. Nobody had responded. Victor Aldgate pulled up the slide. Castellan is a clean acquisition target. Minimal exposure, excellent liquidity profile, and their real estate arm gives us immediate Midwest market access. Zara looked at the numbers on the slide. They were not her numbers. Someone had changed them. She looked again, carefully. The subsidiary data, the 2 holdings she'd flagged, had been swapped out. The new figures were cleaner, tiddier, the kind of tidy that doesn't exist in real portfolio structures unless someone had specifically made them that way. "Excuse me," she said. The room turned toward her with the collective energy of people who had forgotten she was there. The subsidiary figures for Castellan's holdings in the Nevada and Georgia markets have been revised from my original analysis. The numbers currently on that slide reflect an exposure gap of roughly $42 million that my report specifically flagged as unresolved. Silence. Victor Aldgate looked at her the way people look at a ringing phone in a movie theater. Zara. He said her name like it was a mild inconvenience. The numbers were updated by the senior team after your preliminary draft. You're seeing a finalized version. I'm seeing numbers that don't match the underlying asset documentation, she said. The Nevada holding has a tax lien attached that... Can we... Maybe, said Philip Crane, the division head, adjusting his glasses. Let the adults handle the big picture here. The room chuckled. Polite, nervous, grateful, the kind of laughed people produce when they want to belong to the side that's laughing. Zara felt heat climb the back of her neck. She had been called a lot of things in this building over 2 years. She had been called overly cautious, too detail-oriented, not a culture fit. She had overheard once from the glass-walled kitchen the phrase, "Why does HR keep hiring girls like that?" and she had gone back to her desk and finished her quarterly report on time. She was good at absorbing things. She'd had practice, but something happened in that moment that she couldn't explain afterward, except to say that a door she'd been holding shut swung open on its own. "I have the original asset documentation," she said, and her voice was level. "The lien is public record. If this acquisition closes on the current figures, Aldgate is buying a $42 million liability and calling it an asset. I don't think that's a big picture problem. I think that's a math problem." The room went very quiet. The man at the far end of the table looked at her for the first time, not the way people had been looking at her. Through her, past her, around her. He looked at her directly, the way you look at something you want to understand. His expression didn't change, but something in it sharpened. Victor Aldgate's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Thank you for your input. We'll take it under advisement." He turned back to the room. "Pull up the Nevada State Records portal," the man at the end of the table said. His voice was quiet, not loud, the kind of quiet that happens when a room realizes it should be listening. Victor Aldgate stopped moving. "I'm sorry, the State Records portal. For Nevada tax liens. Pull it up." The silence in the room changed texture. Victor Aldgate laughed, short and uncertain. "Nico, we've already. Pull it up." His name was Nico Ferrante. Zara learned that approximately 4 minutes later, when the lien appeared on the Nevada State portal exactly where she had said it would be, and Philip Crane started making a sound like a man whose chair had been pulled out from under him. She also learned, in the following 10 minutes of controlled chaos, that Nico Ferrante was not a consultant. He was not a potential partner. He was the majority owner of a holding company that controlled 23% of Aldgate Meridian's institutional funding, and he had been in this room because someone had sent him a tip that Aldgate's acquisition team was running numbers that didn't add up, that someone had apparently been her 14-page risk report forwarded to him by a source she never identified. Victor Aldgate did not look at her when the meeting ended. Philip Crane did not look at her either. The room cleared the way. Rooms clear when something bad has happened and everyone wants to be somewhere else. Nico Ferrante stopped at the door. "Okonkwo," he said. Not a question. He'd looked at the report attribution on his phone. "Yes," she said. "You flagged this 3 weeks ago." "I did." He looked at her for a moment. "And they put you in a room with no nameplate." She didn't say anything. There wasn't anything to say to that. He left. Zara gathered her folder, her untouched coffee, and her notes. She took the elevator down to her floor. She sat at her desk, which was the one pushed closest to the supply closet, and she opened her laptop, and she wondered, with a calm that surprised her, whether she was about to get fired. She was not fired. What happened instead was stranger. 3 days after the Castellan meeting, an email arrived from Ferrante Capital's head of acquisitions, addressed directly to her, not to her manager, not to the division head, directly to her, requesting a consulting interview for a risk assessment position. The compensation range listed in the body of the email was nearly double her current salary. She thought it was a mistake for 45 minutes before she replied. It was not a mistake. The interview was in a building on Michigan Avenue that she'd walked past hundreds of times without ever having a reason to go inside. 31st floor. A different kind of quiet than Aldgate's offices. Not the performative quiet of expensive furniture, but the genuine quiet of a place where people were actually working. Nico Ferrante's assistant, a brisk woman named Celeste, who wore very good shoes and looked like she had alphabetized her entire life, walked her to a corner office and told her to wait. She waited 11 minutes. She spent them reading the framed municipal bond certificates on the wall and noting, with professional interest, that the portfolio distribution visible on the whiteboard in the corner was better balanced than anything she'd seen at Aldgate. Nico Ferrante walked in. No jacket this time, dark shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbow. He sat down across from her and dropped a folder on the desk. "That's your report," he said. "The original one, not the version Aldgate's team revised." She looked at it. "Where did you get this? Does it matter?" It might, she said. If there's a document security issue in your acquisition pipeline, that's something I'd want to flag. It didn't quite make it to his mouth. You want to flag problems before you've been hired. I flag problems, she said. That's what I do. The interview lasted 90 minutes. He asked her questions she hadn't been asked in 2 years at Aldgate. Not process questions, not compliance box checking, but actual analytical questions. He put 3 hypothetical deals on the table and asked her to find the weaknesses. She found 9. He hadn't expected more than 6. She could tell by the way he paused before writing down the 7th. She was offered the position before she left the building. She said she would think about it. She thought about it for 4 hours, which she spent walking along the lakefront in the cold, and then she said yes. That was in November. What happened in the 14 months that followed was not something she had a framework for, because none of the things that happened to her in those 14 months had ever happened to her before. She had always been good at her work. She had known this for a long time in the abstract way you know something that nobody around you seems to notice. At Ferrante Capital, her work was noticed, her assessments were used. When she flagged a risk, people asked her to explain the flag instead of smoothing it over. She was given a team of 3 analysts, then 5, then 8. She was also, approximately 3 weeks after starting the new position, called into Nico Ferrante's office to find him on the phone having an argument in Italian that she didn't understand, but could follow tonally well enough to know someone had made a significant error. She put the report she'd come to deliver on the edge of his desk and turned to leave. "Stay," he said, not to the phone, to her. She stayed. She stood by the window and looked at the city while he finished the call, and when he hung up, she turned around to find him looking at her with an expression she didn't have a name for. "My brother," he said, "has been moving funds through a subsidiary shell without disclosure." She waited. "I need someone who can build a paper trail that tells me where the money actually went," he said. "Not my legal team. They have a conflict. Not my CFO. He's been with the company for 15 years and knew my brother before I did." He paused. "I need someone who is going to follow the numbers exactly where they go, even if where they go is somewhere I'd rather they didn't." Zara understood, in that moment, what he was actually asking her. He wasn't asking her to investigate his brother. He was asking her whether she was the kind of person who followed the truth, or the kind of person who shaped the truth to fit who was paying her. "You should know," she said, "that if I build that paper trail and it leads somewhere that implicates the company beyond your brother, I'm going to document that too." The expression on his face was the same one she'd seen in the Aldgate conference room, that sharpening like a lens being adjusted. "I know," he said. "That's why I'm asking you." She built the paper trail. It took 6 weeks. It was not pleasant work. The subsidiary structure his brother Dario had constructed was deliberately convoluted, not crude enough to be caught in a standard audit, intricate enough that it would have taken most examiners months to unpick. Zara unpicked it in 6 weeks because she approached it the way she approached all structures. She didn't look for what should be there, she looked for what shouldn't be there, and she followed the absences like a map. What she found was a diversion of approximately $11 million across 3 fiscal years, routed through a holding company in Delaware that nominally existed, to manage intellectual property licensing. The IP holdings were real. The licensing revenue was fabricated. She brought the documentation to Nico on a Thursday afternoon. She put the folder on his desk. She'd put that first report there. Squarely, centered, no ceremony. He opened it. He read it. He didn't say anything for a long time. "My brother has been at this company since the beginning," he said finally. "He was here before it was worth anything. I know," she said. "This will end his career. I know that too." He looked at the folder. "You didn't soften it." "You told me not to." "I did," he said. "I did tell you that." He closed the folder. "Thank you, Zara." It was the first time he'd used her first name. She noticed it the way you notice a small thing that turns out to matter later. The Dario situation unfolded over the following month in the way that these situations always unfold. Legal consultations, a quiet removal, a restructuring announcement that the press covered as a strategic pivot. Dario's name appeared nowhere public. Nico absorbed the internal consequences in a way that Zara watched from her periphery and didn't fully understand until much later. What she understood at the time was that something had shifted in the way he treated her work. He had always taken her assessments seriously. After the Dario investigation, he started asking for her read on things that weren't strictly her department. Acquisition culture fits, partnership negotiations, personnel decisions. He asked her questions in the margins of other meetings. In the elevator, once while they were both waiting for a car in the garage at 9:30 on a Wednesday night when they'd both missed dinner, she answered them because she had answers. She had always had answers. She just hadn't been in rooms where people wanted them. She did not, for a long time, think about any of this as being about anything other than professional trust. She thought this in part because she had learned, a long time ago, to not think about things that would hurt when they turned out not to be true. Then in January, at the company's annual partner dinner, a thing she attended for the first time that year, because Nico had put her name on the list without asking her, Philip Crane walked in. She had not seen him since the Aldgate meeting. He looked the same. He was with a woman in a red dress who laughed at everything he said. He looked across the room and saw her, and something moved across his face that she couldn't quite read. Then his gaze slid to the man standing next to her, and the something on his face changed into something else entirely. Nico was talking to one of the fund partners when he noticed the direction of her attention. He looked at Crane. Then he looked at her. "Do you know him?" he asked. "He was division head at my last firm," she said. "He's the one who told me to let the adults handle the big picture." Nico was quiet for a moment. "Point me to whoever invited him," he said. "That's not necessary. I'm not asking because it's necessary." His voice was even. "I'm asking because someone in my network thought it was appropriate to invite a man who said that to you into a room I'm hosting." He paused. "I'd like to know who made that call." Zara looked at him. She had a very particular kind of intelligence, not the kind that was good at tests, though she was good at those too, but the kind that was good at reading what was actually happening beneath what appeared to be happening. She had used this intelligence for 2 years at Aldgate to navigate a room that didn't want her in it. She had used it for the past 14 months to do work that mattered. She used it now to understand that what Nico Ferrante was expressing, in his particular quiet and controlled way, was something she had not expected from him. He was angry on her behalf, not for the company, not because Crane was a professional liability. He was angry the way a person is angry when something happened to someone they care about before they were in a position to do anything about it. She didn't know what to do with that. "You don't have to do anything," she said. "I'm aware," he said. "I want to." She looked away. The Chicago skyline was visible through the windows, the same skyline she'd grown up watching from the south side, from buses and community center windows and the elevated train that ran past the back of her high school. She'd spent a long time walking toward it. "Then thank you," she said quietly. Philip Crane left the party early. She heard later that Nico had a brief word with the partner who'd extended the invitation. Not publicly, not with any drama, just the kind of quiet conversation that results in a person understanding something clearly. She didn't ask for details. What she did ask for, or rather what she finally let herself acknowledge wanting, came 2 weeks after the dinner. When Nico came to find her in her office at 7:15 on a Friday evening, she was the only one left on the floor. He stopped in the doorway like he wasn't sure whether to knock, and she looked up from the secondary source documentation she was cross-referencing and said, "Is something wrong?" "No," he said. He came in and sat in the chair across from her desk. "I wanted to talk to you about the Helios Group offer." Helios Group was a competing firm that had reached out to her the previous month. She had told him about it as a professional courtesy because she thought he should know, not because she'd been planning to leave. "I'm not taking it," she said. "I know," he said. "I want to talk about why you told me." She put down her pen. "Because it affects your team structure if I—" "That's the professional answer," he said. She looked at him. He had this way of waiting that she had noticed early on. Patient, still, not pressing but not retreating either. Like he had all the time that existed, and he'd decided to spend some of it here. "I told you," she said, "because I wasn't going to leave without telling you first." "Why not?" "Because—" She stopped. She was 31 years old. She had been, at various points in her life, the smartest person in the room and the most ignored person in the room, and in her experience these were sometimes the same thing. She had learned to take up very little space. She had learned to deliver her value in formats other people could use and accept, credit she would never receive, and be satisfied with the knowledge of her own contribution. She had not learned, had not let herself learn, how to simply say what was true when what was true was about something other than work. "Because it would have felt like leaving," she said, "and I don't want to leave." The office was quiet. Somewhere in the building an elevator moved. "I have wanted to say something to you," Nico said, "for approximately 9 months. I haven't because you work for me, and because I didn't want to be the kind of man who—" He paused. "I didn't want to make this building feel the way the last one did." Zara looked at him, across the desk. Her pen was still in her hand. She set it down. "It doesn't," she said. "This building doesn't feel like that at all." He nodded slowly. "I know you've worked very hard to be taken seriously. I know what it cost you before you came here. I'm not going to pretend I understand what that's like." He met her eyes. "But I want you to know that what I think of when I think about you is not. It has nothing to do with the things those people used to frame you with. When I think about you, I think about that conference room, and the way you said I think that's a math problem, and looked at Philip Crane like he was a mildly disappointing spreadsheet." A sound escaped her that she hadn't been expecting. A laugh, small and genuine. "You were already walking toward the door," he said. "You had already decided you were done being invisible. I just happened to be in the room." "You pulled up the portal," she said. "You gave me a reason to." She sat with that for a moment. She thought about the bus at 6:15. She thought about 12-minute early arrivals and water pitchers. Nobody thanked her for, and the desk closest to the supply closet, and the quarterly reports attributed to people who had not written them. She thought about the Friday evening she'd spent 6 hours unpicking a shell structure that most auditors would have walked past, and the way Nico had said thank you, Zara across a closed folder like it was a thing that mattered. It had mattered, still did. "I think," she said carefully, "that this is a conversation we should probably continue somewhere that isn't my office on a Friday night." Something moved in his expression. Warmth, she thought. Actual warmth without the controlled layer over it. "They have a corner table. No one will bother us." She reached for her coat. "For the record," she said, pulling it on. "I'm going to keep flagging problems." "I know," he said. He was already at the door. "Even yours." "Especially mine," he said. "That's why you're here." She turned off the lamp on her desk. The office went dark except for the city light coming through the windows. That same skyline, persistent and indifferent, and hers in the way that places become yours, when you've made yourself a life in them anyway, despite all the reasons you were given not to. She walked out. He held the door.